Senator Paterson.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister of Employment, Senator Cash, and it relates to developments in questions I asked last week in question time. Can the minister further update the Senate on recent reports concerning officials of registered organisations and potential conflicts of interest?
Yes. The Minister for Employment, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Paterson for the question, and yes, I can. Further to serious questions being raised regarding the failure of the AWU to accurately disclose a range of transactions in which industry super funds gave money to the AWU when Bill Shorten was National Secretary and running for Parliament in 2007, I can advise that last Thursday the AWU, in an attempt to protect Mr Shorten, amended their 10-year-old disclosure statement. Specifically, they reclassified a $27,500 donation from Australian Super to the AWU to say that it was not in fact a donation, but rather, and I quote, an other receipt. Despite this convenient reclassification, questions regarding conflicts of interest still remain and have not been answered. I remind senators that Mr Shorten in 2007 wore 3 hats, being a Director of Australian Super, National Secretary of the AWU and Labor candidate for Maribyrnong, at the same time as money was changing hands. Mr Shorten must now come clean with the Australian people and explain as follows. Did he disclose these conflicts, and how? And if not, why not? Did he remove himself from any decisions around these payments, and how? And if not, why not? Did he personally ask for any of these payments, or did others ask for these payments on his behalf? Further, and just as importantly, Mr Shorten should now outline what conversations he and his office have had with the AWU, which led to the AWU filing just last week the amended return.
The time for answering the question has expired. Senator Paterson, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Why is it important that registered organisations and other bodies that have financial dealings with them show greater transparency?
Minister.
Well, Mr President, 10 years after this questionable flow of money occurred, the AWU are still trying to get their story straight about conflicts of interests with their former boss. Organisations like Australian Super and the AWU have an important duty to protect the interests of their members. Mr President, they manage the retirement savings of hard-working Australians, which they hold on trust. I don't believe that there would be any Australian who believes that their hard-earned retirement savings should be used for political campaigns or events. And that is why greater transparency is needed and why Mr Shorten needs to come clean and answer these important questions. He needs to tell the Australian people why payments were made from the superannuation fund of hard-working Australians, which ended up benefiting his union.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Paterson, final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister advise what steps the Turnbull government is taking to ensure that unions and employer groups are acting in their members' interests and not in their own self-interest?
Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr President. And the payments between Australian Super and the AWU, and then the AWU and then Labor, have primarily benefited the interests of Mr Bill Shorten. It is not clear what benefits have flowed to Australian Super or AWU members, and these questions need to be answered. Mr President, the Turnbull government believes that unions and employer groups should at all times be acting in the interests of their hard-working members and not their officials. We have critical legislation before this parliament to prevent corrupting and secret payments between registered organisations and employers and full disclosure of any legitimate payments that are made. If it's not a legitimate payment, Mr President, the question needs to be asked, why is it being made? All registered organisations, employers and unions should be transparent.
Thank you, Minister. Senator